Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Anti-War Room. We're here once again with John Isaacs of Council for Livable World and Darcy Scott Martin from True Majority, and we're going to talk about a very, very busy week once again on Capitol Hill with respect to the war in Iraq. And John, why don't we start before we get to the big House vote on the supplemental that passed the Appropriations Committee of the House last week? What goes on in the Senate this week?
We're going to see a rerun in the Senate on the Reid resolution to set a date to begin the withdrawal of troops from Iraq and a goal to finish the withdrawal by next year. Reid's resolution, as people recall, was defeated 48-50 last week. He's going to introduce his same resolution probably as an amendment in committee or as included in the chairman's bill, draft bill, in the Senate Appropriations Committee this Thursday. There also could be a provision on Iran, a requirement that the president come back to Congress before attacking Iran or any other country. So if this happens, again, Thursday when Senator Robert Byrd and the Senate Appropriations Committee meets, this same bill, the supplemental appropriations bill that the House is considering next week, will be on the Senate floor next week, and we could see new votes on Iraq next week.
Okay, so in the Senate Appropriations Committee, a rerun of Reid plus Iran language could very well end up in that bill. And how would it fare, or how do you think it will fare in the Appropriations Committee?
I think it'll be adopted in committee, especially if Chairman Robert Byrd includes it in the chairman's mark. It'll be up to the Republicans to knock it out, and I don't think they will. It'll be a close vote because everything in the Senate is close. So
that then is likely to get on the floor next week. Why do a rerun of what was defeated last week? What's the theory behind that?
The theory behind it is we want to have as many votes on Iraq as possible this year on the supplemental appropriations bills, defense authorization, defense appropriation, to put the pressure on both President Bush and on Republicans in the Senate and the House. Let them vote for the war. Let them support the surge, the increase in troops. Let them support the war over and over again. They will pay a price, at least the theory is, in the elections in November 2008. People like Collins of Maine, like Coleman of Minnesota, Smith of Oregon, and several others. If there'll be vote after vote after vote and force them to support the war if they're going to, or break with the president to oppose the war.
So that many more headlines week after week of Senator Collins voting for the war. Okay.
Now I saw that Lieberman said he was willing to switch to the Republican Party if he saw language come to the Senate that was the same as the language in the House. Would this language be strong enough to fall into that category, do you think?
I don't think so, because Lieberman dealt with this legislation last week. He voted against it for sure, but that wasn't enough to break for the Democratic Party. And I think by most accounts, the language that Pelosi and the House Democrats have adopted thus far is stronger than the Senate language offered by Senator Harry Reid of Nevada.
Okay, so let's talk about the House, Darcy. Appropriations Committee of the House voted out this package on Iraq. It's hitting the floor this week. What's going to happen?
So Wednesday there'll be a meeting of the Rules Committee, the folks who decide how a bill will be managed on the floor, whether people can offer amendments to it, how it will be taken up by the entire House. There still remains a debate within rules about whether to make it amendable or not. It's certainly not in the interest of the leadership, as they perceive it, to have it amendable, because although there might be amendments that are desirable on one side, there might also be amendments that are desirable on another side and can change the bill significantly. So with that in mind, it is going into a little bit of a dogfight on Wednesday for Rules Committee. And then when it comes out of that, theoretically, it would be on the floor on Thursday. That being said, the leadership is very involved in counting how many votes they think they have. They want the supplemental to pass. And if they think that they can't count up to 218 on Thursday morning, we won't see the bill on Thursday morning. We won't see the bill on Friday morning. We won't see the bill on Saturday morning. We'll see it on the day that they believe that they have 218 votes. There's certainly a number of members of Congress on both the Republican and Democratic side who are being a bit cagey about which way they're going to vote, and that comes from a variety of different reasons. Number one, if you are outspokenly saying that you're going to vote against the supplemental, you're receiving an unimaginable amount of pressure right now from the leadership on the Democratic side. If you are in a position where you see something in the bill that you would like, which is a lot of the pork barrel spending that went into the bill is going to cover people's agricultural needs, people's extra veterans benefits, different relief for different crises that have happened across the country. And if that's going to affect your area in some way, then there's potential that you're trying to leverage how that money will be used. And so there would be a reason not to declare your vote one way or another.
Kind of a reason why you don't want legislation or sausage being made, all of this pork, as it were, going into the bill. But on the other hand, it's picking up.
Veterans benefits pork? Is that
well, probably less. Absolutely. That's probably less pork than spinach, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. But this is the way this process works, right? I mean,
That's right.
I mean, now when I was in the House, I was a member of the. I was in a caucus that was against this kind of thing. We'd like to see bills actually introduced. We'd like to see them debated. It was called the Pork Busters Coalition. So we would be on the floor just haranguing this for that very reason. I think it's just bad policy. It's bad for it makes people cynical about this whole process. But it may pick up some Republican votes, John Isaacs. You think it's defendable, at least defendable?
There's a difference between pure pork, where people are putting in money for home state projects, a road or a dam or a post office in a district, and money to help veterans, money to help in Katrina relief, money to help. There's about 10 states short of their school education funding. Health care is short. I mean, these are legitimate needs. Perhaps it should be considered another process, but I'm reluctant to call all this money, and especially helping veterans, pork.
Well, there's grade A pork, perhaps, and grade B pork, and we've got a lot of grade A pork in this.
And the additional pork, which we're discussing now, is on top of what was put in when the Defense Department and the President realized this was the last supplemental they were ever going to get. So when they were talking about a bill that was going to come out in March, actually April, and is only going to be used to fund the war until October, and it's the largest supplemental request we've had. It's a huge amount of money going to all kinds of weapon systems, all kinds of shortfalls in different Pentagon budget pockets that have nothing to do with what is going on in Iraq at this point.
Okay, now we talked last week about what is in the bill, and we talked about the good. We talked parts of the bill, and certainly our community, certainly the Win Without War Coalition, are on two different sides of this bill. Some people feel it is a step in the right direction. John certainly feels that way. We take this step, and the authorization for the full defense bill is coming up around the corner. We can strengthen it, and the appropriations bill coming. That this year will help us to strengthen it. On the other hand, as Darcy has argued, with true majority, this bill passes, and our soldiers could be in Iraq through September 1st, and even beyond that, because of the training provision, there could be tens of thousands of trainers left behind, perhaps embedded in Iraqi units. So you can look at that discussion last week. It's in our archives, and you can also see the bill itself and the provisions of the bill here on the website. All the grade A and grade B pork and everything else, good, bad, or indifferent, on the website. But I want to ask both of you, the votes coming up this week. Now, Darcy, you've just mentioned that if the 218 votes, which is what you need to pass, are not there, it's very unlikely that it will actually even appear on the floor. But let's just get a sense of post vote. If this thing were to pass, if this thing were to fail, what are the implications? And what you're saying is that we don't have to worry about it failing because it just won't be voted on. But we have, in fact, a supplemental that means that if we're going to, there are lots of important spending here that needs to be made, whether it be on spinach or veterans or perhaps even money to get our troops, some of the troops redeployed. So there's got to be a lot of pressure on getting these things passed. So it can't be pulled forever, right? I mean, ultimately, it's going to have to be put on the floor.
Yes, although, there's obviously a variety of strategies that could go into extending the amount of time that you would want to have to vote on it. And I think even more likely is that it will pass with a lot of thumbs being broken, something that I was morally opposed to when the Republicans did it, and I'm actually not so happy when the Democrats do it either. But then it will go to the Senate and have yet another iteration, and then it's been facing a pretty strong threat of a veto from the president.
Yeah, Tom, I have a riddle for you. What do George Bush, Dick Cheney, Minority Leader Boehner, and Minority Leader McConnell in the Senate have in common?
I don't know, but this tape could go on Comedy Central.
They all oppose the supplemental appropriations bill because it's dangerous to their war. It's the strongest measure that might pass Congress that would help stop the war. And my feeling is if you get Bush and Cheney and Boehner and McConnell against the bill, we should be for it. If the bill goes down to defeat this week or next week, if this House majority can't be found for the bill without the Pelosi language, Congress will fund the war. They just won't have any anti-Iraq legislation. It's not a perfect measure. It doesn't stop the war tomorrow, as I'd like to see and we all like to see. But it's the best we're going to get, and will build the pressure on the President and Republicans to get us out of Iraq.
So this is really a strategic, tactical debate going on within the coalition. I think it's important for everybody to realize that all of us believe, our position is that we want the money appropriated and the time invested to get these soldiers out of Iraq safely and securely as quickly as that can be done. I mean, that's an agreement right across the board. This is really a tactical, strategic question. So we get to the end of the week. We're going to see either a headline that says the House votes for a date certain, whatever that might mean, or there's the House delays vote, or House defeats a date certain, and we're back to square one.
Well, we're not quite back to square one because in terms of the supplemental vote, for our organization, we've opposed every supplemental that's ever been offered, and it would be hypocritical of us to say that we would approve of this one, especially when it fully funds the surge. However, what is going to start happening in the next few weeks is we're going to start doing the real incremental, measurable work on cutting funding for the war, and that's going to happen in defense authorization and defense appropriations. This is just basically one last big symbolic moment, and then we'll be moving into the real work.
Okay, from symbolism to realism, it's all going to happen throughout this week, and we're going to come back at the end of the week to talk about what happened, and then we're going to come back again early at the beginning of next week to talk about what all this means and what is the prospect for the week coming up. But regardless, I think it's important for everyone to, particularly on this, the anniversary week of the invasion of Iraq, to be in communication with your members of Congress, and regardless of where you come down in this tactical discussion, tell them for crying out loud, we've got to get these soldiers out of Iraq. Do everything that you can possibly do as a member of Congress to make that happen. Thanks very much for being here with us today in the Anti-War Room. John, Darcy, again, thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few days.